This is a story of two imaginary countries, Gustan and Hustan. These two nations share the same continent. Gustan has a northern half and Hustan has a southern half. A chain of mountains traverses both nations along the eastern side, flanked by another chain on its western side. Between the two ranges lie the plains of Gustan and Hustan, where the farms, towns, and cities are located. Both nations have similar climates, with similar dry and wet areas, with similar hot and cold areas. Both nations have very similar economies. For instance, they have about the same number of farmers who own the fields, pastures, orchards, fish reserves, and small factories to make and produce the food. Each farmer is an independent business person and belongs to a respected profession in both lands. Both nations have about the same number of makers, whose products range from kitchenware to automobiles to farm machinery to computers. Both nations have their miners. Each miner owns property in one of the two mountain ranges. The East Mountains contains minerals such as iron, copper, and tin, and the West Mountains contain coal. Both mountain ranges are covered in forests, which the miners also harvest for paper and lumber. Both nations have their service providers, who are the police officers, teachers, doctors and nurses, the water and electricity plant workers, truck drivers, and government administrators. The citizens of Gustan and Hustan, although not overly rich, do have a little disposable income from their labor and business initiatives to spend on their own enjoyment. When they want to partake in the better things their society offers, they have two possible choices. They can spend their disposable income on the artists who produce theater, music, paintings, and sculptures. Artists and makers are frequently working together to create for a little profit goods that are both artistic and practical. Or they can visit the establishment run by the casino operators. Here, citizens can indulge in a little gambling, possibly increase their wealth, and enjoy some of the excitement that gambling offers. In both Gustan and Hustan, the artist and gambling casino operators thrive in about the same proportion. Both nations are actually quite self-sufficient, and as a result, there is very little trade between them. When one sees how similar these two countries are, it's difficult to see the one big difference between them: their system of governance. The citizens of Gustan have decided that those citizens elected to positions of governments really cannot be trusted. Therefore, Gustan has devised all sorts of laws and regulations that prevent untrustworthy elected citizens from abusing their position for their own profit. Because it is hard to prove who is trustworthy from who is untrustworthy, say the political philosophers of Gustan, trustworthy elected officials have to abide by the rules made for the untrustworthy. While Gustan society has shackled its elected officials in their legislative deliberations, it has also decided to give its citizens an extremely large amount of freedom. As long as one citizen's actions do not directly interfere with the life of another, that citizen is free to continue the action. It is far better, the recognized thinkers of Gustan say, that average citizens have the freedom to act as fools than to have one untrustworthy official get away with a corrupt deed. Gustan, on the other hand, has a different approach in governance. It has decided that it does have many trustworthy and very capable people in its midst. Gustan has devised an electoral process that is good at putting those trustworthy people into positions of governance and a legislative process that encourages these minds to work together rather than compete for power. Gustan has also recognized that civil liberties are not an absolute concept. For any society to function, it must provide a certain degree of freedom, and it must create laws that limit that freedom. These liberties will change as society changes. Rather than enshrine these freedoms into a constitution, the citizens trust their elected officials and their legislative processes to make these changes as needed. So, here we have two nations, very similar economies and social structures. Only their systems of governance differ. Do we dare imagine their destinies? In Gustan, the casino operators have banded together to devise a clever business plan to increase their business. Instead of competing with each other for the same number of gamblers, they collectively decide to market all their casinos to those citizens who are not gamblers. Working together, the casino operators create a long-term advertising campaign that shows gambling places as the places to be, the place for fun and excitement, and the place where everyone else is. Because Gistan is a free country, there is nothing to stop this advertising campaign. Casino operators in Gistan see what their colleagues in Gistan are doing and would like to do the same thing. Not so fast, say those trustworthy elected officials of Gistan. We see some social problems that have been created because of gambling. If your vision of increasing the number of gamblings becomes reality, is it not unreasonable to expect that the number of social problems is going to increase? The elected officials of Gistan feel that they need to be more proactive than just making citizens wary of the intent of the casino operators in Gistan. They start to engage in some public consultation about gambling in their nation. The first question they ask is, if Gistan has more gambling, would this make us a better society? Very few citizens agree with this statement. A second question arises. If Gistan reduces the amount of gambling it has now, would this make us a better society? Most citizens, even many gamblers of Gistan, have to agree. Next, the citizens of governance offer their citizens a third question. If we want to create a better society, should we direct some of our society's resources today towards reducing gambling in the future? Again, most citizens think this would be a wise use of their collective resources. Then there is one last question. Would you trust the government of Gistan to limit a few of our current civil liberties to help this goal? Because the citizens trust their government, most of them say yes. The government feels it now has attained a long-term mandate to reduce the amount of gambling in Gistan. Acting on this mandate, the government quickly passes a law that prevents any advertising that depicts gambling as a preferable lifestyle. It sets up a citizens board to which casino operators must submit their ad copies for approval before they can put these ads in the media outlets. If any ad seems to be designed to attract gamblers from one casino to another casino, there are no restrictions. Censorship, cry the casino operators. Potential for abuse and corruption, they shout. When their rhetoric fails to generate the public sympathy, they look for allies. If the government can take our rights to advertise in the way we want to advertise, what is to stop them from taking away the rights for farmers and makers? If we don't stop the government now, it will be too late. Whether or not citizens understand the rationale behind the directive for casino operators to submit their advertising for approval, the citizens believe that further arbitrary restrictions of a business's right to advertise are not likely. All other freedoms citizens have enjoyed for generations will remain intact. The casino operators find very little public support for their cause. The government realizes that reducing gambling is going to be a long-term project. Any resources invested now towards this problem will not bear fruit for at least a decade. It decides it needs a 30-year plan to create a culture that does not promote gambling as a virtue. It realizes that without consultation with the citizens of Gistan, the plan is unlikely to be effective. Ironically, the first group the government of Gistan consults with is the casino operators. It tells them the 30-year plan to reduce gambling will probably not have too much effect on their current operations for another decade. The casino operators should expect similar profits to what they have been earning. After the first decade, however, the society of Gistan will have fewer gamblers, which means more competition among the operators for fewer gamblers. As the plan continues to evolve and bear fruit, says the government, your profits will decrease. We advise you to start thinking about getting out of this business. Some casino operators deplore this interference in business, while others do not believe the government is capable of engineering such a shift in values in Gistan society. But other casino operators recognize the profits they earn in this next decade will help them move to another occupation. The government tells its citizens that it wants their input on how it can implement the 30-year plan. It uses the elected national, provincial, and local representatives to consult with the citizens to garner ideas and information. With the consultative process, these representatives bring these ideas into one anti-gambling document to which the citizens of Gistan can see their ideas and concerns becoming part of the process. The document has many ideas, for instance, making gambling casinos less visible in the streets and roads of Stand, government-sponsored advertising that creates a cultural message that gambling is not acceptable, placing a small tax on all wagers, banning the worst forms of gambling, nationalizing other forms of gambling, encouraging less harmful forms, educating children and youth about the drawbacks of gambling, issuing licenses for gamblers with a limit each gambler can gamble each week, and many more. One very innovative idea that comes from the first round of consultation is for the Stand Society to place more emphasis on employing artists. If we could only create a culture that has appreciated art more than we do today, we would not need as much recreational gambling, is one comment of one thoughtful citizen. From this comment, ideas such as subsidizing the artists or their works, paid by gambling taxes, more emphasis on art appreciation in schools, providing a free newsletter to all citizens about the up-and-coming artists in Stand Society, and so forth. The anti-gambling document created by the citizens of Stand becomes an excellent catalyst for more ideas on how to change the values about gambling in their society. The government sets up a second round of consultation to discuss this document and refine and enhance its original ideas. As expected, suggestions in the first document spawn more and better ideas. Other concerns are uncovered in the second round that need addressing. This round of consultation produces a much better second document to which the government and the people can use as a guide to attain their collective societal goal for the next 30 years. The national government then announces a 30-year plan based on the second document. It tells the citizens that it cannot immediately implement all the ideas, but many of the ideas not used today will likely be tried in the future. It also admits that the entire plan should be considered as an experiment. No one really knows how each idea will work, but the government will be watching the progress of each idea implemented and making the necessary changes to make the idea work, to the point of even discarding a previously well-thought-out idea. The plan also lists responsibilities for the provincial legislatures and the local councils. Some areas of Stand think they have special insights into attaining this goal and have prepared an excellent plan of their own. The national government allows these areas the freedom to conduct their own gambling reduction program and expects to learn from these experiments. If the local plans work, the entire society of Stand can benefit from this experiment. If not, and the national plans are bearing fruit, then citizens of these areas will better see the wisdom of the national plans. Moreover, the plan makes it clear that during this 30-year period, no citizen will ever be prevented from gambling, nor will any casino operator be forced out of business by the government. The plan emphasizes that it will achieve its objectives by shifting values, not by prohibition. Even though many citizens of Stand see the logic behind Stand's directives, they are quite alarmed that Stand passed into law to limit the freedom of casino operators to advertise. Such a society, they say while shaking their heads, will eventually evolve into a totalitarian regime. It is very ironic that they see the advertising restrictions imposed on casino operators in Stand as a violation of individual liberty, yet the farmers of Stand have to follow regulations to produce safe food, and the miners of Stand have regulations about withdrawing resources from their land in an ecologically sound way, and the makers of Stand have regulations to provide safe workplaces for their employees. So the Stand casino operators are unimpeded in implementing their marketing plan to convince citizens of Stand to partake in the pleasures and excitement of spending their recreational time and disposable income in gambling casinos. To create the right marketing message, the casino operators hire many artists for their advertising campaign. The artists are very good at creating the clever slogans, jingles, and scenes to make it look like gambling is a preferable and traditional pastime for all citizens of Stand. The artists are very happy with their improved employment opportunities and appreciative of their creative talents being put to such good use. For the first 5 years of the campaign to make gamblers from non-gamblers, the casino operators do not earn much additional profit. The extra costs of advertising are just being met by the revenue of the new recreational gamblers and by the former recreational gamblers becoming, as the ads were saying, very enthusiastic and committed gamblers. But slowly, the advertising campaign is changing the value system of Gastan. Gambling, except for a few Puritan types, becomes an acceptable activity for most citizens. If Gastan sociologists are watching closely, they will observe more gaming topics in the idle conversation of average citizens. The traditional topics, such as weather, theatrical productions, sports, and politics, are being replaced with the best casinos, gambling games with the best odds, the luck of last night's gaming, and the very few heroic players who won big. Elected politicians in Gastan start feeling more comfortable about appearing in casinos. As a trend becomes even more popular, they need to be seen in a few casinos during the election campaign to win votes. Now, the casino operators are making excellent profits. And because they are paying more business taxes on these profits, the government of Gastan is quite happy. All is well in Gastan, it says, because the gambling industry is doing much better than before. The first visible accident of the increasing gambling is the artists. Because the casino operators have successfully created a value system that encourages gambling, they no longer need as many artists for their advertising. So these artists return to the same artistic endeavors that they were doing before. But this work no longer provides for them. The citizens of Gastan are spending their recreational time and disposable income in gambling casinos and have less time and money for art. Most artists are now workers at the gambling casinos, and with too many artists not being able to fulfill their dreams, Gastan has a more discontented citizens than it had before. It would not be fair to say that Gastan did not have social problems related to gambling before the casino operators began their massive advertising campaign. Some Gastan citizens were already gambling addicts. Their work and family life suffered. Some of these addicts took to small crime to pay for their addiction. Children were growing up in a household where one or both parents were problem gamblers or being deprived of opportunities that could have made them more responsible and capable when they became adults. But as the number of recreational problems increases, so do the number of problem gamblers. Gastan society needs to hire more police, prosecutors, and jail guards to handle the increase in crime. More dysfunctional families are raising more dysfunctional children who also become problem gamblers and problem citizens. Workplaces are not as productive because more workers are speculating on the gaming tables instead of concentrating on their work. And for the first time in centuries, Gastan is suffering food shortages because it has too many gambling-addicted farmers who are not being very attentive in their farming operations. Perhaps, worst of all, laying aside the many artists being a loss of spirit in the Gastan culture. Citizens do not care or think anymore. What matters most are the gaming tables. While Gastan is falling, and please note that many citizens of Gastan will argue vociferously that their society is not falling, Gastan society is nearing the end of its 30-year plan to reduce gambling. Like Gastan had its fair share of problem gamblers who were directly or indirectly causing other problems in society. But because the government of Gastan has been successful in creating a culture of non-gambling Gastan society, very few Gastan citizens are now gamblers, either recreational or addicted. It would not be correct to say that Gastan has eliminated problem gamblers, but the problem gamblers in Gastan are much fewer than a generation before. Therefore, Gastan experiences less crime, so it requires fewer police, prosecutors, and jail guards. By not needing to hire these extra service providers, Gastan citizens of this generation are paying less taxes and have more disposable income to enjoy what the artists of Gastan have to offer. The workplaces of Gastan are more productive and more enjoyable. Gastan citizens have a higher level of prosperity, which they will need for the next challenge. For centuries, the miners of Gastan and Gastan have been extracting coal in the West Mountains as their main source of energy. But this coal will be used up within a generation. If societal changes are not made, Gastan and Gastan citizens a generation from now will find themselves incapable of the same prosperity that they have experienced. Even if the government of Gastan wants to, it cannot become proactive in solving this problem. It is too busy directing many of its resources into resolving problems that originate from the cultural value of gambling in Gastan. The miners will find more coal, says the government of Gastan. Or it says, let the free market solve the problem. But there is neither more coal nor a free market solution. The coal seams of the West Mountains have always been very accessible to the miners, so coal has never been expensive. The price of energy will not go up enough to investigate new energy sources until the coal runs out, but this will be too late. In contrast, the Gastan government already has experience in looking at least a generation down the road. It gives the citizens the truth. The coal will run out and we must find new sources of energy. It embarks on a massive consultation with the citizenry. Because the citizens of Gastan trust their government, they take this warning seriously. Many ideas appear how best to resolve this crisis. For example, a coal tax to encourage conversation and to fund research for alternative technology. Developing geographical centers of economic activity that will use less energy. Subsidizing farmers, makers, and miners to adapt more efficient practices. And educating adults and children to expect less available energy in the future. Some ideas are implemented now, some later, some not at all. As each idea is implemented, the government sets up a process to monitor how well each decision has been working. It will be ready to make changes, discard the idea, and learn from any mistakes. When the coal seams run out, Gastan already has a working system of solar collectors, wind generators, hydrogen plants, and hydrogen fuel cells, and large batteries for storing electricity when the weather does not cooperate. Because of the decision 2 generations ago to sideline the gambling casinos, Gastan society has more resources in both the public and private sectors to make these gradual changes without causing great hardship on the general citizenry. With new electrical facilities built, this generation of Gastan citizens will enjoy even more prosperity than their parents and grandparents. But in Gastan, the picture is not so good. Neither the government nor the free market could find an alternative sources of energy in time. Gastan citizens are using their forests to heat their homes, and these forests may not last another decade. Because energy is now so expensive, farms and factories are no longer as productive as they were. The solution, says the government of Gastan, is trade with Gastan. So they send a delegation to their neighbor to open up trade talks. What do you have to offer? Says the negotiator for the government of Gastan. Why, says the head of the Gastan trade delegation, we have these excellent casinos for your citizens as a vacation destination. They can experience the pleasure and excitement of gambling as we Gastancians have had for the past 2 generations. Only a very few of our citizens would enjoy your casinos, says the negotiator for Gastan. You have very little that interests us. Two generations ago, Gastan and Gastan were very similar countries. Now they are very different. In one country, the citizens could not trust their custodians of government. In the other country, they could.